Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about recent passing of a great bodybuilder that happened, and this was David Paul. So some of you guys might be aware of who David Paul is, but him and his brother, they're twin brothers, they were in movies such as The Barbarians and Double Trouble, and David Paul was a pretty good actor actually, and he was quite the eccentric when it comes down to art. Like, he would be involved in music, he'd be involved in acting, and I never really got a chance to really know him, but he seems like he'd be an extremely interesting, if not really maybe inconvenient guy to be around because he was so creative. He was really one of those true creators. So if you do watch any of the interviews on the internet with David Paul, you'll see what I'm talking about, but he was a very deeply spiritual guy. So the reason why I want to talk about this is that I had a brief interaction with this man in 2001 when I had just finished competing in the Natural Universe in the WNBF. And then I went down to LA like I usually would do, and I'd see if I could meet some photographers or meet some sort of people that could give me some opportunities in the fitness industry. So I was in the gym one day, and how I met David was I saw this dude that was walking around and looked like he was a member of Van Halen. At the same time, he had a bodybuilder type physique, and he had like bandanas around his head, and he had like this long hair, and I don't know, he was just like almost like a walking Madonna in male form, but masculine with bodybuilding and rock star type of status at the same time. He was a really interesting character to look at. It was like he was a walking piece of art. And I didn't really have the depth of understanding of art at the time to really appreciate what this guy was representing. But there were rumors going around that he was a great photographer, and I was seeing a lot of his photos showing up in the muscle magazines, and I was seeing the creativity that was involved in it. So he would be doing photo shoots with the pianos in the background, or neat like superhero type photo shoots in the middle of the night in an alleyway. And his shots were really, really interesting. So they weren't the typical just bodybuilding training type shots. They were just, there was some thought and creativity that was put into them. So anyway, he was getting a reputation for himself, and I just happened to be in the gym one day, and I'm like, you know, I was with a buddy of mine or whatever, and then in walks David Paul into Venice Golds. And I was like, hey, who is that or whatever? And he goes, oh, that's David Paul. He's one of the Barbarian brothers or whatever. I'm like, oh, really? That's kind of cool. So I went up to him and I met him, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? I see your work. It's really good and stuff like that. And I knew this guy was different as soon as I met him, because it was just a different sort of interaction that I'd had with most of the people that I met in LA. There wasn't really this, let's just say there wasn't really this projection of like, hey, here I am, I'm this guy. And there wasn't like this overwhelming ego that I was encountering. It was almost like I got pulled into a vortex. You know, the best way to put it was like you almost get pulled into a vortex, because I could tell he was like looking at me as I was talking. He was actually with me. And then all of a sudden it's like he took a step back. And I said, hey, you know, maybe we should do some photos or something like that, or whatever, or maybe I should work with you or something at some point. And then I could see he took a step back, and he looked down and looked up, and he kind of like got a bird's eye point of view or something like that. He's like, yeah, we should work together. Let's do something, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing tomorrow or something? I think it was like the next day or 2 days later that him and I scheduled the photo shoot. So I ended up going down to Gold's Gym, and then him and his assistant, this lady that was with him, she was driving, and I got in the car and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go do some photos. So to really share my point of view or my perspective on this is that I was in the middle of a different city, different country, just trusting that this guy was not crazy, that he was going to do some good photos. But at the same time, I could tell he was running on a different paradigm. He was just really creative and not necessarily fitting into a certain box that I could say, okay, this is sane or this is not sane, or this is like what a normal guy is or not. I didn't really have a frame of reference, right? So it was almost like a leap of faith on my part to interact with him, but there was something about him I liked, and I couldn't quite understand it. So anyway, we're driving in the car, and we're driving down the slums of LA, right? And he's like, yeah, we're gonna do a photo shoot somewhere. And I'm like, well, I don't see any kind of place that we're gonna be doing a photo shoot. He goes, well, we're gonna kind of like do some Renegade photo shooting, right? I'm like, okay, whatever. I've been experienced with that a little bit. So I knew that sometimes, you know, to get the shot, you had to kind of sometimes do some shady sort of business practices as far as, you know, shooting without a permit, or maybe you're shooting on property that isn't necessarily, you're not approved by the owner or whatever, but you just want to get that shot because it's a specific feel or location or whatever, or maybe it had the certain background that you needed or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm on board if it gets a good shot, right? So as we're doing the car ride, I'm thinking, hey, this guy's pretty normal. He's all right. He's just kind of a funny guy. He starts talking about the alkaline diet and everything. And that's something that most of us are all familiar with now. There's these different types of diets, and it's all like common pop culture. But back then, it wasn't quite as common. There were books on different diets and things, but it wasn't like there was this entire trend around eating a certain way. Not as much so as there is now. Because this was just like at the end of the 90s, really, 2001. And the internet was around, but it wasn't necessarily, like there was no social media or anything. There was a total different mentality around these different lifestyle choices and certain diets and stuff. It was like, sometimes they're almost like on the fringe of conspiracy theory. So the conversation that came up with him as I was driving was, I said, okay, so you're eating a lot of avocados and he was always drinking water or whatever. And he was talking about alkalinity and everything, and that really helps with your body, you know, feeling better and all this kind of stuff. And he had a pretty good physique at the time. You know, some people say that, you know, he was a smaller guy and everything, but, you know, compared to me, he was actually pretty big. He was like, still had a massive upper chest, and he still looked really good. And he was just eating an avocado right in the middle of the car, like opening it up, just eating it as we were going to the photo shoot, right? And so obviously I was asking him what he was doing. So he basically started to explain that the alkalinity of the diet, why it's important, why the body should be alkaline and everything. And, you know, there's different schools of thought on this. So I'm not saying I agree with it 100%, but, you know, whatever. It's, you know, whatever works for you. That's my agenda, you know. That's my philosophy. But then he starts to say, or then I said, well, where did you learn about this? Why did you start doing this? He says, well, I talked to this doctor. And this doctor talked about these different experiments he did and why he believed in the alkaline diet. And then I said, well, where did the doctor learn it? Did he read a lot of studies or something like that, or have his own experience? And he said, well, the aliens told him. And and when he said the aliens told him, he started to laugh because he could hear how absurd it sounded when he said it. Because it wasn't like there was like, it's not like this was common knowledge that there was like aliens around in your neighborhood or something like that, you know what I mean? And I'm driving in the middle of like the slums of LA, you know, because it was the slums for sure. Like you can recognize slums when you're going down. and I'm thinking, okay, he just said aliens. He's already a little bit different. I don't know what category to put him in. And now I'm not sure if he's just going to drop me off somewhere after getting a few photos and then Jason's never heard from again or whatever. Like I wasn't sure what was going to happen. It was kind of like one of those moments where it's like, and then he knew, you know what I mean? Like those memes on TikTok, like, and then he knew he was screwed, right? It was almost like one of those moments. So anyway, we start doing the photo shoot and I'm like, okay, he just pulls over to the side of the road. He just goes here, right? Just tells his assistant, okay, right here. I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't see, you know, where the photo is going to happen here. You know, just a sidewalk and a bunch of alleyways. And when I got out of the car, just the overwhelming smell of piss hit me because all the homeless people, you know, urinating in the alleyways. And I was like, hopefully no, we're not walking down there because I don't want to be barefoot in a piss-filled alleyway, you know, in posing trunks doing some shots or something like that, right? And then he goes, oh no, okay, so just strip down, just get in your posing trunks and stand on that garbage can. So there's cars going by. Like cars, pedestrians, people walking by, and I'm standing on top of a garbage can and just nothing but posing trunks, and I'm like posing like this, and he's taking these shots and stuff, and I'm like there's cars honking, like girls yelling out the windows. It was a really hilarious kind of thing, and it's kind of normal, I guess, when you're doing photos and stuff. You're always in public situations, but he just had this sort of way of doing things. Like there was really no plan. And so when you listen to him do an interview, there's this interview on YouTube you can find, you'll see that he really is in the moment, which is a real true artist, like a real creator. And everything he's saying is so true. Like he was so ahead of his time that I realize now that the template that he lived by and that was talking about is really the template that I live by in such a deep level that it's really difficult for me to explain. And I'm glad that he kind of forged the road ahead of me because he was one of those first bodybuilders to really say, art is more important, let go of the ego, and be in the moment, right? Be in the moment and see what happens. And if you're hitting too many obstacles here, well, just you know, go in the direction where there's not as many obstacles. Don't let your ego constantly drive you against a wall, which is basically the message of this channel. So I would say David Paul, in a very great way, I mean this in the highest possible way, was one of the first Gallantians, to tell you the truth. I mean, he would probably be insulted by that, although he probably wouldn't let his ego get in the way, but he really was an explorer down this path of self-discovery and using bodybuilding as an art and use it as a way of spiritual evolution instead of just embodying an ego and constantly becoming stuck in that. So in this way, I really liked David Paul. He was a really interesting dude, and I kind of am kicking myself because I should have reached out and talked to him some more. I don't know if I would have been able to get hold of him or not, but he was really one of those multi-talented people that was extremely interesting to talk to. And I remember when I first met him at the gym too, because I'd actually trained with him a little bit. And at the time, he wasn't the typical strong that he was before, but he was still pretty strong. And I remember we just sat down and did some bench presses. He said, "Hey, let me do some bench presses with you." So he was doing some benches with me, and I think he got 315 for a set of 4 or 5 reps because he was pretty shredded down at the time. And he did it quite easily, but at the same time, he got up off the bench and he just laughed at himself and he goes, "Oh, I'm weak as fuck," right? And then he just looked at me, he just laughed. And I'm like, well, you look pretty awesome, so who cares, right? But anyway, he was just this humble, sort of neat dude, you know? And I don't think a lot of people got him, but I don't think I even got him at the time. But I think if I would have hung out with him now, he would have been a kind of neat dude to hang out with. Like, I don't know a lot about him personally. I don't know a lot about anything else that might have went on in his life and stuff, but I do know my interactions with him were quite positive. So this is one of the photos that showed up. This is one of the photos that showed up in Muscle Mag later on. And this was that actual picture of where I'm standing on top of a garbage can. And like I said, at the time, I could not tell what the shot was going to be, right? Because I didn't see the building in the background or anything, but he had me on top of that garbage can, and then there you go. And you know what was going through my mind at the time is like, man, these people, are they going to stop honking and whatever? And so there's another shot in Muscle Mag, I don't know if I can find it, where I was doing like a kick out the side in the middle of traffic, and it's at a construction zone, and there was cars going by on both sides, and I was doing a kick in my posing trunks, and he took a shot of that as well. So it was kind of neat. But that was my experience with David Paul. He was a really neat dude, and I really liked hanging out with him just for the day. So my best wishes go to his brother, Peter, because I know this must be an incredibly difficult time for him. But yeah, I just thought I'd share my experience basically with David Paul because, yeah, he was a neat person. I think he'll be missed by a lot of people, possibly a lot more than even he knew in his life. So anyway, I just wanted to share this brief moment in time with you, and I guess this would go into career highlights. This was one of the career highlights of my career. I did get a chance to work with David Paul, one of the incredible artistic phenoms in the bodybuilding industry. So thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. I'll miss you, Dave. It was good working with you.